So, and again, this is just a small segment of some of the challenges that as a caregiver you have possibly seen with this COVID-19, with this coronavirus. So how do we cope with all this? You know, we've been given all this information about physically. You know, we've been taught from day one all of the physical things that we need to do. But how do we cope in all of the main 5 areas of our life, physically, cognitively? You know, what are we thinking? Emotionally, socially, spiritually? How are we coping with all of this? What can we do to better cope with this? As caregivers, what impact is it having on us, and what is it that we can do to ease some of these burdens? And my desire today is that something that's said in this webinar will be a blessing to you, something that you can take back and implement that will make a positive difference in your life, that will help you in your role as a caregiver. So we look at the different areas. We look at the physical area. You know, what's going on physically? How has it impacted us physically? Has it taken a toll on your health? And if so, what are some physical things that we can do to help us as we cope with the effects of this pandemic? How do we take care of ourselves? Well, physically, it may be something as simple as a walk. It may be something as setting reminders to remember to take our medication. It may be remembering to take care of our body by eating. So there are different realms of physical that this virus has affected, not only for those who may have had the virus, but for those who are physically affected just because of the stress of the virus. So it's important that we take care of ourselves physically. It's important that we listen to our body. It's important that we know our body and that we know when we're needing a break or when we're needing to change up our routine to do something differently. And then we think about cognitively, our thoughts. What's going on? How is this affecting us? And how can we cope cognitively? You know, you may have had a whole array of thoughts since all of this started. There may have been thoughts that you never dreamed that you would have. But cognitively, and maybe this virus has affected you. Maybe it's affected the memory. Maybe the stress of caregiving along with the virus has just been a little too much. So what do we do with that? So cognitively, how can we cope? How can we have input into our cognitive self? That may be something as simple as putting a puzzle together, something to keep your brain active on something fun. Some of you may enjoy crossword puzzles. I can't tell you the number of people that I've come across that have said, oh, you wouldn't believe how many jigsaw puzzles I've put together recently. So that's a way of coping and dealing with that cognitive to shift that mindset. And then emotionally, what kind of toll has this pandemic taken on you emotionally? And how can you cope with that? You know, emotions, we have feelings, and they are what they are. But what are our feelings telling us? What are you worried about? Is there something you're sad about? Is there something you're angry about? What's going on emotionally with you? You know, have you just stopped to think, you know, what are my emotions telling me? And oftentimes we find that our emotions begin to affect our physical self. If our emotions become overwhelming, then we can start to find that we are experiencing some physical problems. So what do we do with those emotions? What are some ways that we can cope with how we are dealing with the emotions? Because this is a different time for all of us. We're all living, I mean, we've not experienced this before. So what are your emotions telling you? So how can you cope with those emotions? How can you express it? Maybe that's by talking to someone else. And it may surprise you to find, oh, wow, I didn't realize they were in the same boat that I am. They're feeling some of the same things. So then it validates those feelings that you have. You may in addition to talking to others, you may do this webinar is an excellent way of, you're able to see some people, you're able to hear from people. So it's a way of coping emotionally, getting some feedback into your soul of things that maybe you're needing that are beneficial to you. It may be that music helps you emotionally. It may be that there's a movie that you just really speaks to you emotionally. So it's actually just looking at what those emotions are and how we're going to deal with those emotions so that, do we need to FaceTime a friend and say, hey, I'm just having a rough day? You know, um, on a good day without the virus, when you hear, I want to go home, I want to go home, I want to go home, after the 50th time of I want to go home, it takes its emotional toll on you. And then you add the pandemic, so your emotions may be even more heightened. So having that friend to listen to share with, makes a big difference. And then we look at socially. What are we doing socially that now that we can't be together? I know some of those guidelines are beginning to release a little bit, but still socially, we are more isolated than we've ever been. So what are we doing to socially stay connected? Again, is it that honest, open communication with a friend that you're able to say what those struggles are, what those feelings are? Um, is it that FaceTime? Is it that call, that phone call? But what are you doing socially to stay connected? Because it's very important that we stay connected with each other. Socially, you may be playing a board game with a family member, or you may be playing a game online. Just something to keep you socially active, socially interactive. And then as we look at spirituality, what are we doing spiritually to keep us connected? How are we coping spiritually? Because, we are spiritual beings. That's how we're made. So, at a time like this, typically we start searching and pondering and asking those why questions, and we tap into that, our belief system. We tap into what brings us value, what brings us meaning, what our life goals are at this time. These are all spiritual aspects of our grief. Um, and what is the best care for your spirit? It's to be intentional about giving it the time and the attention that it needs. You may be questioning, why is this happening? Or what's going to happen afterwards? And it's okay to have those questions, but it's a time to tune in spiritually and take spiritual care of yourself. That may be through meditation. It may be through prayer. We are all unique individuals, and so what's spiritually important to me may not be what you consider spiritually important. But it behooves us to take care of ourselves spiritually as well. So we look at all of these 5 areas of our life. We're physical. We have thoughts, our cognitive. We're emotional. We're social. We're spiritual. And if any of these gets out of balance, then sometimes we have a tendency for life to get a little bit out of balance. So it's important, especially at a time like this, that we are taking really good care of ourselves and that we are coping in these areas in ways that are productive and helpful and meaningful for us. We think about this grief pandemic. We think about loving and caring at a distance. And you may not have even thought about this pandemic as being a mean of grief. A lot of times when we think of grief, we automatically think of death. But loss is not always death. You've probably had a multitude of losses during this pandemic. So as we think about this pandemic, as we think about being caregivers, as we think about the things that we're going through, maybe the separation from loved ones, maybe financial implications, maybe counseling those once in a lifetime events that we've all anticipated. Maybe it was a marriage of someone in the family. Maybe it was a special birthday. Perhaps it was a death. Perhaps it was a funeral that couldn't be attended. All of these are areas of loss, and they impact us. Um, and again, loss is not always a death. So as you think about your role as a caregiver, and you look back on what's going on in your life right now, you could probably take a piece of paper and jot down some things that you have lost simply because of this pandemic. As a caregiver, things that maybe it's loss of control. You had your daily routine set up, and now things aren't like they were before, and there was a loss of control. So as we look at this and we think about this grief pandemic, we think about the care that you are providing, we think about you as a caregiver, we think about all the different roles you play. There is grief that is intertwined with this. And there's a difference in grief and mourning. I didn't realize this for quite a few years, but then I was taught that grief, those are the things that are going on inside of us, those feelings that we have on the inside, the things that we're thinking when we experience a loss. And grief is normal. We go through grief, but mourning is what we do with that grief. Mourning is grief gone public, if you will. It's the journaling, it's the writing, it's the singing, it's the talking about it. It's what we do on the outside with that grief. And you may ask, well, why is this important with caregiving? Because as you have experienced loss in your caregiving, it's important that you're able to mourn that you recognize that, there is a grief here, and it's important that you be able to mourn that. So the next section we want to look at is called Six Needs of Mourning, and this is really related to the coronavirus. We have permission to use this from Dr. Alan Wolfelt from an article he published in March of this year, March the 26th. And these needs are found very commonly when we're mourning a death. But as we said, not all loss is a death. So as we're looking at the 6 needs of mourning as related to caregiving and as related to this pandemic, the first one we want to look at is we want to acknowledge. We want to acknowledge the reality of the pandemic and your grief. It's the reality of the grief, about this pandemic, where you're at, what it's doing to you, what threatens you, what threatens what you care about. The acknowledging that, yes, you know what, I've never thought about it, but I am experiencing a loss because of all of this. I am a caregiver, and even with caregiving, there are losses that you have experienced, no doubt. But as we look at caregiving and the pandemic, I want you to acknowledge the reality that, yes, there have been some losses that have occurred. But as you think about that, as you acknowledge that, then I also challenge you to think about, as you acknowledge that, and you just maybe just sit there with that for a moment, the acknowledgement that, yeah, I've had some grief. I didn't realize that's what this was, but I've had some grief because of this. So what are you going to do when you acknowledge that? Are you going to talk and realize what I was going through? And it's okay that I felt these things. It's okay that I acknowledge these. It's healthy that I acknowledge that these are the stressors in my life. These are the things going on. So sharing your feelings, sharing your thoughts. A lot of times when we acknowledge things, I have found it to be true in life that sometimes just giving voice to something renders it less powerful. And the same can be true in acknowledging the reality of this pandemic and the grief that it may have caused you in your caregiving role, in your daily role, in your life. So acknowledging that, yes, there is a reality here, that there are some losses that have occurred. And what am I going to do about it? I'm going to maybe pick up that phone and call my best friend and talk to them about what I'm going through. Who knows? They may be going through the same thing. And then it oftentimes helps us to feel better, to be able to just get that off our chest. Maybe we don't need anyone to do anything about it. We just need them to listen, to be present to us, to listen to what we're saying. So acknowledging the reality that there is some grief, there is some loss that has occurred. The second one is to honor all your feelings. We have a wide array of emotions as human beings. We can laugh, we can cry, we can get angry, we can get sad, we can get happy. We have such an array of emotions, which is a wonderful thing. But as you honor your feelings, you may find that, oh, wow, I've been angry about some things. Or, you know, I feel like I've just been in shock. Or maybe I have some regrets about things. Or maybe I just need to sit with my feelings. I'm not sure what I'm feeling right now. It's all just jumbled together. But to honor our feelings, even though they may be pleasant, even though they may be uncomfortable. And a lot of times it seems if we have an unpleasant or an uncomfortable feeling, then we come down on ourselves or we feel bad for feeling that. But feelings are just that. Feelings are what they are. They come up within us to get our attention. And how do we deal with those feelings? We want to be aware of those feelings. We want to be aware of what's going on. We want to name those feelings. We want to express them outside of ourselves. We want to, again, talk about them, write about them, journal about them. Some of you may enjoy journaling. Some of you may have never journaled. I encourage you, get you a notebook, get you some sheets of paper, write down what you're feeling, and write down how you're dealing with those feelings. Because what you may find is that they will soften as you begin expressing these feelings, and they may actually start providing you comfort and relief when you start honoring the feelings that you have. So honor those feelings. Acknowledge the reality of your grief. The third one is to practice gratitude for the good in your life. You know, there's always something to be thankful for. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen the little meme that says, you know, there's always something to be thankful for. Sometimes you just have to look a little harder than other times. And that may be true. But practice gratitude for the good in your life. Call or make a list of people or things or events that are most precious to you and express these memories. Maybe you want to write a thank you note. Maybe you want to keep a gratitude journal. Maybe you want to take your phone and in your notes section, I've actually done this, start you a list of things you're thankful for. And as you think of something that day that you're thankful for, just type it in that little notes section on your phone. And then it's amazing to go back into the week, into the month, a year later and look at, oh, wow, look at all the things that I was thankful for the gratitude, for the good that's in my life. A gratitude of what was and what is will help us to foster the hope of the good that is yet to come. So I encourage you, practice that gratitude for all the good that you have in your life. There's always something that you can find that you can be grateful for. It may be the only thing that you can find that day is the sun came up. Jot it down. You're so thankful to see the sunshine. And before long, you're going to change your mindset where you are focusing on the good things that you have to be grateful for in your life. So practice gratitude for the good, honor your feelings, and acknowledge the reality of this pandemic and the grief. The next one is to be kind to yourself. Be patient. Be compassionate with yourself. Be compassionate with yourself as a caregiver. Be compassionate with yourself as a caregiver during an unprecedented time in our nation, in our country, in our world with this pandemic. Take care of yourself. You know, it's easy sometimes to be kind to others, but sometimes we're not as apt to be as kind to ourselves. So I want to encourage you today, be kind to yourself. Do something kind for yourself. You know, we talked earlier about the 5 areas of our life: physical, cognitive, emotional, social, spiritual. Maybe pick one or more of those areas of your life to find a way to be kind to yourself. Maybe it's physically. Maybe I'm gonna take a walk for my good health. Or maybe cognitively, you decide, you know what, I think I will put a puzzle together. I'm going to do something for myself. Emotionally, maybe you pick up the phone and call that friend, or you FaceTime that family member. Socially, maybe you take a walk. Maybe you get online and chat with some friends. Maybe you have some family members that you can play a board game with. And then spiritually, again, the meditation, the prayer, whatever works for you, but finding ways to be kind to yourself. We want to stay in balance with all 5 areas of our life. So I challenge you again, if you only want to pick one area of your life to start with, that's fine, but find a way to be kind to yourself. And then to practice that gratitude, go in that phone, go in that journal, on that sheet of paper, on that notepad on the refrigerator, wherever it may be, and write something that you're thankful for today. Honor your feelings. What is it you're feeling today? Honor that. It may be a happy feeling, it may not be a happy feeling, but you honor that feeling. And again, acknowledging the reality of the grief that this has caused. The 5th need that we have as we're mourning is to search for meaning. You know, it's natural to wonder why. It's natural to ask questions. We had a life prior to this pandemic. We have a future that right now is unknown with this pandemic. So right now we're in a transition in time. So what do? We choose to be present at this time. We choose to care for self every day at this time. We choose to find what brings us joy, what brings us meaning, what brings us purpose, and to do those things at this time. So as we search for meaning, that may be sitting alone with your thoughts and saying, God, why is all of this happening? You know, what's going on in our world? What are my values? Have your values changed? Has this caregiving, has this pandemic, has it caused you to have a deeper search for meaning in your life, for where you fit in life, for your purpose in life, for your values in life? So that's a need that we have, is to search for meaning. Where do I fit in? What is it that I'm doing? How am I making a difference? And what is it that I need to help me to find that meaning in my life? Is it in any of those 5 realms that we've already talked about? So we search for meaning. We look to see, you know, what's going on in my life? What are the questions that I have? What are my questions about being a caregiver? What are my questions about being in this pandemic? What is it that I'm looking for? And while we're doing that, remembering to be kind to ourselves. Remembering to go down that little gratitude for the day. What are you thankful for? Are you thankful that you learned how to get in on a Zoom meeting? I remember the first time that I did that, I was very happy and thankful that I stretched this brain to be able to know how to do that. You know, it was an accomplishment. And there again, it gave meaning to my life that I was learning new things. My feelings during that time may have been anxiety. There may be a lot of anxiety right now that you're experiencing. But we acknowledge that and we move on. And then the 6th need of mourning is to reach out to others, to be able to give and accept support. For some of you, it may be much easier to give support than to accept support. Some of you may have no problem accepting support. But as we've been in this period of isolation and we've longed for that personal contact, there was grief. And we need that emotional support. We need to be others to be able to reach out to us, to give and to accept that support, to have that empathy for each other. You know, it may be that the support was you needed someone to go to the grocery store for you, but there was a feeling of hating to ask anyone. It's okay. It's okay to reach out, and it may be that that support comes through phone calls. It may be that that support comes through some type of social media. It may be that that support comes through some kind of a handwritten note, either that you write or that someone has written to you. Now, I try my best to stay current with technology as much as possible, but I am old school when it comes to handwritten notes. To me, there is nothing more enduring than to receive a handwritten note and to be able to go back to that. If you're having a day where those emotions or those feelings are kind of low, or you're needing to have some gratitude or to be kind to yourself, I love being able to pick up a handwritten note and reread it. So that has prompted me in my life to be able to write notes to others. Now, they may not appreciate a handwritten note to the extent that I do, but I know the joy that a handwritten note brings me. So being able to do that for others actually helps me to be able to feel like I'm reaching out. So I encourage you, if you're one that enjoys writing, get you some note cards, get a piece of paper. It doesn't matter what it's written on, but write a note to someone that's been important to you in your life, or maybe to someone you know is struggling that needs a kind word. We never know what a difference a note, a kind word, a phone call, a text, an email, we never know what kind of a difference that can make in someone's life. We never know what kind of day they're experiencing. And when you receive that kind of support, maybe the person on the other end that was giving you that support had no knowledge that you needed that at the time. But it meant so much to be able for someone to reach out and support you. And during this pandemic, as we, over the next few months, begin to emerge from this pandemic, I'm hoping that we will find that life is more meaningful. And one of Dr. Wolfelt's quotes was that that our life will be more meaningful as we do the work of mourning, as we live better, as we love better, and as we change the world for the better. So as we do our work of mourning, because we can have that grief inside, we can have these thoughts, these feelings, but if we don't do something about it, we carry that grief. And then, unfortunately, sometimes it can rear its head later on and cause us problems. So as we do our work of mourning, as we get this grief outside of our thoughts and we do something about it, we are doing work that is beneficial and meaningful and that will help us as we cope. It will help us as we look for the hope that is yet to come, that hope of what our world will be like post-pandemic. So all of these areas are important for us. And I encourage you, if you want to get the video from the webinar, or if you need me to send you some information on this, but I encourage you, do your work of mourning. Take care of self. Because you've heard the saying, if we don't take care of self, who will? Or the saying that, you know, you can't give from an empty vessel. I encourage you to take care of self, to do your work of mourning, to look at these 6 areas and see what it is that how you can benefit and what you can do to help yourself. So as we look at finding hope, you know, it's important that we have self-care. It's important that we are mindful. Some of you may have heard about mindful meditation, mindfulness, just being truly mindful about the events that you're doing, the things that you're doing, that you're creating to be a healthier you. Look at exercise and the role that it plays. And we want to look, as we talk about exercise, we know that spiritual practice help us with stress reduction. They help us with health and well-being. And when we look at exercise, a lot of times when we're stressed, you've possibly heard them talk about either fight or flight state. And exercise is a natural way to help us restore our body to a normal state. Because when we exercise, we have good chemicals called endorphins that are released into our body, and they help us to feel better. So a couple of things we put here. Aerobic exercise, that's things like walking or bicycling or swimming. There may be others that you think of, things that get that blood flowing. The benefit of an aerobic exercise is that it will help strengthen your cardiovascular system. It helps that heart and helps get that blood flowing like it should. It can help regulate our blood pressure. It can help regulate our blood sugar. For those of you that may have a problem with diabetes, the exercise there can help regulate blood sugar. Help us work off emotional steam. And in caregiving, I know that you've all, at some point in your life, have had some type of emotional steam that you just needed a release valve for. So exercise is one way of helping work off that emotional steam. Aerobic exercise can also help relieve chronic tension. It can help with decreasing feelings of depression, feelings of anxiety, and with this pandemic, with caregiving in general, a lot of times there is a tremendous amount of anxiety that comes with that. Anxiety of, am I doing the right thing? Am I providing the right care? Anxiety of the unknown. So help us refocus. Exercise, we think of stretching exercises. Stretching exercises are those things that help us relax. And they too will help relieve chronic tension. It can help with feelings of anxiety and depression, help decrease those. It can help improve your circulation, your muscle strength, your joint mobility. And what I want right now is for everyone, whether you're on the screen or whether you're just by phone, I just want you to stop for a minute and just take a big stretch. I mean a big stretch. Something you may not have done in a while. And as you take that big stretch, also take you some good cleansing breaths, just some good breathing in and out of. It's amazing what just that little bit can do for us. When our bodies are stressed, we may not have 15 minutes that we can go exercise somewhere, but we can stand up, we can stretch, we can deep breathe. There's things that we can do, that we can exercise, that we're not even really oftentimes thinking that that's a way of exercising. That's a way of releasing some tension. That's a way of improving circulation. I would caution you that the aerobic exercise I probably wouldn't do right before bedtime, but the stretching exercise might help at bedtime. It might help you to better get a good night's sleep. So as we look at exercise, we know that that's a way of coping. That's a way of restoring that hope to our life. The value to our life. So investing in who we are. I encourage you to create a time to exercise. Maybe that's, maybe it's something you can't do daily, but maybe you can do it 3 times a week. Maybe there are certain days, because of your caregiving, there are certain days that maybe they're better than others. Maybe help motivate you. Maybe you need an accountability partner to help motivate you. You need that support of a friend. That may be being able to take a walk outside. It may be doing an exercise online with a friend. But just creating a time that you say, this is my time, and I'm going to get some exercise in. Because we all know that we can have very familiar excuses of why we don't exercise. I've been guilty myself many times. We say, oh, I'm too tired. When we know that exercise will help with that. Or we say, well, it's boring. I don't want to do that today. Well, find an exercise that you like. Or you may say, well, I've just been working so much, I don't feel like exercising. But I encourage you to just try to get some exercise in. Well-being. Knowing that our life has meaning and purpose, we are spiritual beings. With that, it may include religious practices or religious rituals, but we are spiritual beings. And usually it includes some type of quiet time, because there is a need within us to express ourselves as a spiritual being. But the manner that we do that is as individual as everyone on this call is individual. So find what works best for you. For you, it may be meditation. For someone else on the call today, maybe it's a quiet reflection. Maybe it's a prayer time. Maybe it's an inspirational reading. Maybe it's going for a walk in nature, listening to the birds, being just being aware of nature, the beauty of the creation. You know, going to worship services may have been a big part of your life. And maybe through caregiving that may have dwindled. With the pandemic, it may have ceased. More than likely, it has ceased of being able to go and meet together. But there are online services, there are apps, there are different things that are a good substitute. It may not be as good as being there, but find what works best for you. Find what ministers to you as a spiritual being. Maybe it's yoga. Maybe yoga helps you to relax and puts you in touch with your spiritual being. Maybe it's singing. These are just a few things. But find what works best for you as a spiritual being and take care of yourself spiritually as you're taking care of yourself in all of the other ways. There's a poem I want to share with you, and I'll be happy to send this to Ellen if anybody wants it. The author is unknown, but the title of the poem is called Grace. And as a caregiver, I think this will you will resonate with this. And as a caregiver in a pandemic, I think you will resonate with this. Give me the grace to care without neglecting my needs, the humility to assist without rescuing, the kindness to be clear without being cold, the mercy to be angry without rejecting, the prudence to disclose without disrespecting my privacy, the humor to admit human failings without experiencing shame, the compassion to give freely without giving myself away. So I encourage you, take care of yourself. I mentioned humor was mentioned in that poem, so I put a little meme up here, caregiver moment number 12. Some of you may be able to identify with this. Arguing for 30 minutes to get your loved one to wear matching socks, then realizing you went out with your own shirt on backwards. So I encourage you, find the humor in the day. As you're going through the day, find things that you can laugh at. Don't be so hard on yourself. If you make a mistake, be able to, sometimes laughing it off is one of the best things you can do. But today, I do encourage you to do one little thing today to take better care of yourself, and then tomorrow, repeat. I have my contact information here, and Ellen also has it. You can contact me via email at nancy@lmhpco.org or by phone, toll free at 888-546-1500, extension 1. And if you don't get me, feel free to leave a voicemail. If there's something I can help you with, I'll be happy to return your call. So at this time, I'm going to turn the screen back over to Ellen to take any questions we may have. If we're not able to get to all of the questions today, Ellen, I'll be happy for you to send a list to me, and I'll be happy to answer those and send them back to you to distribute to the group if need be.
Thank you, Nancy. That was wonderful. Anybody have any questions? You can feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can put it in the chat box down below. Is there any questions that anybody has?
I have a question.
Okay,
Mainly, can I get that poem?
sure.
Yeah,
Ellen, I'll give that to you and let you distribute it to everyone on the call if you would like